everybody, today I'm in Westfield, Indiana, and I am going to talk about a question that I hear quite often about Westfield. It's not a real super specific one, but people come here and the Indy Metro and they'll hear about Westfield and they'll just say, why Westfield? Why would people want to move to Westfield? Sometimes unconvinced, sometimes convinced, but they want to know what the big deal is. So in this video, we'll talk about that some. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in Westfield, of course, Indianapolis, Indiana, or any of the surrounding cities and towns, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video. Now we have people reaching out to us from all over the country with questions about Westfield, of course, and especially the one we're going to talk about today, but Indianapolis and all the surrounding cities and towns. So if you have questions at all about any place in the Indy Metro, then make sure you reach out any way you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back when it comes time for you to make your move to the Indy Metro. All right, again, today I'm in Westfield, guys, and I'm close to downtown, or you could say that I am in downtown Westfield, and I'm walking along Park Street, which is nicknamed Restaurant Row, and actually just to the north, going east-west, is Jersey Street, and we may walk up there here in just a little bit too, but there's a cool little coffee shop called Rivet Coffee up there, but got a couple of neat restaurants going up and down this street as well. And just off to the east, we get into Grand Junction Plaza, which is brand new, actually really, really new, and a cool gathering spot for anybody that lives in Westfield. If you go just to the south, and it runs east-west, you got the Midland Trace Trail, and then historic downtown Westfield, which is not very big at all, but it is pretty neat, and there's some pretty serious plans for all of that in the future for sure. So the whole point of this video is not really to give you an exploration of downtown Westfield, because there's a lot more to Westfield than just the downtown, but why would anybody want to live in Westfield? So I've heard this numerous times. Now, people that live in this area know what Westfield has to offer, know what it's all about. I would say a lot of people in the Indy Metro probably know that, but of course there's some that don't. They aren't familiar with Westfield. Just like if you live in Fishers, well, you're probably not that familiar with Avon at all, because you really likely never go there unless you work there. Or Greenwood versus Westfield. They're just so far apart from one another that you don't really have an opportunity all that often to get to know the other city, unfortunately, because they all have a lot of really good things going for them. But Westfield is a place that has grown tremendously in the past 20 years, especially in the past 30 years or so. But in the past 20, it's exploded. So near 2000, there was really only less than 10,000 people here. And now, 2022, pushing 50,000. So a lot of Westfield is really, really new. A lot of homes are really new. You get a lot of things in like the downtown area, really new. And then even extending off of that downtown that are exceptionally new, like Grand Park, which is the biggest youth sports complex in the entire country. And it's right here in Westfield. There's more than 2 million people that go through that park every single year. So a lot happening in Westfield, honestly. But people will come, let's say from another state, and they'll say, well, what's the buzz about Westfield? So we've heard buzz about Westfield at least, but what is it about Westfield? What is the big deal? Why does everybody make a big deal out of it? There isn't a simple answer to something like that, honestly. It's, of course, a subjective thing, and I can't say that there's one particular thing about Westfield that makes it a really nice place. Some people are going to like Westfield, some people aren't going to like Westfield. Now, I personally, biased opinion of it, I really love Westfield. I was a teacher at the high school for 16 years before I got into real estate about 10 years ago. And I had a great experience. I saw that school grow up tremendously. I saw Westfield since I was in it in the 90s, all the way up until now, more than 20 years later, about 25 years later or so. And I've seen a lot of changes. And I think a lot of the changes are really super positive. They've had some growing pains, but when you grow that fast, who doesn't? And I think they've dealt with them very, very well. This is the Midland Trace Trail, actually part of it, going through Grand Junction Plaza. So we'll just walk along this a little bit, but I don't know. I don't have a direct answer for that. So what makes Westfield better than Zionsville? Or what makes Westfield better than Greenwood? Or something like that, or Greenfield for that matter, or Avon, or Plainfield, or Brownsburg? Nobody can tell you that because it's going to be an opinion. There is no measuring stick to say one place is absolutely better than another place. It's ridiculous to think that. But I can say that there is a number of reasons why Westfield is a very nice place to live, and it probably is a place for a lot of people. Now, I would say there are a lot of people moving here for sure. Obviously, it's grown rapidly over the past 20 years and it's continuing to grow. There's a lot of new construction here, a lot of new homes being put in because the demand is there. People want to be here, but not everybody wants to be here, and that could be for a number of reasons. Number one, I would say, is probably just the geographic location, where it is. So it's way north. So if you're looking out here at Grand Junction Plaza, that's State Road 32, a lot of new Westfield goes north of that. So you get up to 191st and even north of that. So there's a little town called Sheridan, Indiana, and it used to, years ago, 25 years ago, really be pretty far north, but Westfield has grown so much, it's kind of pulled Sheridan in, seemingly, and it's made it to feel like it's not so far out there. So if you were to travel from there, way north Westfield, all the way to downtown Indianapolis, you're starting to push 30 miles. So if you had to be in downtown Indianapolis, which I know a lot of people don't have to be, they don't have to go there for work, but if you're going to a Pacer game or a Fever game or a Colts game or something like that, or baseball, the AAA team, the Indians, it's a drive. It is. It's not a terribly difficult drive. The roads to get there are actually quite nice, but it's just a sheer distance. So being this far north, you're probably going to spend most of your time here in Westfield, or either in nearby Noblesville, Carmel, Fishers, something like that. And you're gonna get into what Westfield has to offer, or you're gonna get into what any of those other cities have to offer for that matter. So geographic location may not be the best for everybody, and that's okay, completely okay. Would I live in Westfield? I hear that question quite a bit. If Westfield's such a great place, and what's the big deal about Westfield? Would I live in Westfield? Absolutely, I would live in Westfield. There are lots of places in Indianapolis and outside of Indianapolis, like Carmel or Greenwood or Avon, Plainfield, Brownsburg, Zionsville, lots of places that I would like to live and that I would certainly try living. Westfield is definitely there. It's at the top of that list, but it doesn't work for me and my family. We live elsewhere, lived in Fishers for a long time, but we live in Greenfield currently, but that's just the geographic place that works the best for us, for my wife's job especially. So very, very close to my wife's job. Super simple drive. For me, it doesn't matter. I'm all over the city every single week, so it doesn't really matter where I live, but I would certainly love to live in Westfield. Just because I don't live in a city doesn't mean I don't like it, that's for sure. Anyway, it's a subjective thing. So the other part about Westfield that maybe people wouldn't live there necessarily is because as it's growing, it's becoming more expensive. It is really clear that Westfield wants to be a premier place to live in the Indy Metro. The new homes that are being built, these are nice homes. They are not cheap homes. So if you're looking to get into Westfield under $200,000 or under $300,000, that's going to be hugely challenging. You are just extremely limited on what you can actually get for that. So the new neighborhoods that are going in, we're talking 4s, 5s, 6s, and more. So it's clear that Westfield has that vision of being a premier place to live. And I think that's something that people do like in Westfield. It is a nice place to live. There is, I don't think, a question about that. It is nice looking, drive through. Now there is construction in some different places, especially up here on State Road 32. Traffic on State Road 32 for sure. That's because Westfield has gotten more populated and more crowded. So of course it's going to have more traffic and that is going to be widened, but it will look nice. And then some of the newer streets, as you just go around, especially this area and then out into the newer areas, it is very clean, it is very put together, and it is not, I don't think in any way, of course this is subjective, unattractive at all. It is a nice looking place. So there are other nice looking places in Indianapolis, in a lot of the cities that surround Indianapolis. Westfield is not alone in that by any stretch, not at all. There are other very clean, very nice looking places to live. Westfield is just one of those. And as they grow, they want to continue to be one of them. So what's the big deal about Westfield? Well, that's one piece of the big deal about Westfield. It's just that it is a nice looking place to live. Plus it's very safe to live in as well. Now, Indianapolis, the city, very unfortunately, it does not have a great safety reputation. I think that is a whole other topic, but I think most big cities across the country, they don't have a fantastic safety reputation, but it's very pocketed. There are lots of places that I have lived. There are lots of places that I would live in Indianapolis still and feel very safe. But there's some places in Indianapolis that I know I would not feel safe living, just like any big city. But when you get into Westfield, I would feel safe pretty much anywhere in Westfield. But again, that's not exclusive to Westfield. That applies to a lot of the cities that surround Indianapolis. So It's not a unique thing, but again, it's one of those pieces that you can put together to say Westfield is a fantastic place to live. And what's the buzz about Westfield? That's one part of it. And I think there's some other reasons that are probably a little bit smaller. So Westfield is growing, and you can still, for the most part, live close to the heart of it. There are places in Carmel or Fishers, especially because they're pretty big cities now. I mean, they're 100,000 people apiece, and you kind of get on the outskirts of the city. So it's not like you're really far from the center or what's going on in that particular city, but just take downtown Fishers as an example. Downtown Fishers isn't exactly central in Fishers. It's kind of towards the west side, and most of Fishers is growing out towards the east. So if you wanted to go to the amphitheater in downtown Fishers in the Nickel Plate District, and you live way out on Cynthia Ann Road near Fortville, well, that's gonna take a little bit of time to get there. It's not gonna take you 30 minutes, nothing like that, but it'll take you 20, 25 minutes to drive over there, and that's just because of the sheer distance that it takes you to get there. Now, Westfield being smaller, roughly half the size of those cities, some people like the idea of getting into a city like that probably will eventually be the size of those cities. It has the potential to do so. They like to get in a little bit closer to the ground floor. You could actually live a little bit closer to the heart. Now, that's just a small piece, but that is something that people have mentioned to me. And years ago, I never really thought about that all that much and placing a huge importance on it, but there are people who place an importance on that. So they want to be in there a little bit closer to the ground level of the city and its growth and establish themselves in there. The other part of Westfield, though, that is a whole lot bigger, is the school system. The school system, not unique as far as being a solid, extremely highly rated school system, because there are many of them around Indianapolis, many. But Westfield is one of them. But it's smaller right now, which is kind of nice to a lot of people. So it's really grown. So when I was in there in the 90s, there were 600 something kids in the high school. Now, 2,500 or so, somewhere in that range. So obviously a whole lot bigger. But still, it's not as big as any of the Hamilton Southeastern, the Fishers high schools. Those are both over 3,000 kids. You get into Carmel, and it's over 5,000 kids. Biggest high school in the state. Phenomenal place. Fantastic reputation, but that's a big, big school. Westfield and Zionsville are both the smallest of all the schools here on the north side. So we're talking in that 2,500 student range. I think Zionsville is just a little bit smaller now than Westfield, and Westfield is certainly going to outpace the growth there of Zionsville. But a super highly rated school district and a more moderate size, which is very attractive to people. People do like that aspect. Now, because of that smaller size and the smaller size just of Westfield in general, well, Westfield is less crowded, at least right now. Now it's gotten a lot more crowded, which means more cars, more traffic, and more roads, more infrastructure. That's all coming, and that all has been in the works in the past 20 years. So it's something that has been added for a long, long time. So there are roads in Westfield now that either look wildly different than what I saw them for the first time back in the 90s when I really came to Westfield for the first time, and brand new roads that never even existed before. So Westfield definitely will get more crowded, but it's not as crowded as some of those cities surrounding Westfield or Indianapolis in general for the most part. So if you get into Greenwood's a lot more crowded. It's dense. I wouldn't call it terribly crowded, but it's more crowded and more dense feeling than Westfield is to me. And then if you get into Carmel and Fishers, well, which are the biggest cities, I mentioned those because they're the biggest cities near Westfield. Noblesville is also bigger than Westfield, close to 65,000 people or so, although it doesn't have the crowded feel, I feel like, for a city that size. Really like Noblesville a lot. The cities of Fishers and Carmel, while I wouldn't certainly call them crowded, because if you're used to traffic in Los Angeles or New York or Miami, something like that, then you'll laugh at the traffic in Fishers and Carmel because it's not that bad, really not that bad. But when you compare them to Westfield, Westfield is just less crowded. So you get a little less traffic. And some people really, really like that. You're kind of up here further to the north geographically, so you're away from that stuff a little bit, and you've got the opportunity to have a little less crowd. So Westfield, it is a fantastic place, and people have been asking me for a lot of years now, what is the big deal about Westfield? Well, I've never been able to give a very good, solid 1 or 2 line answer for it. It's really something that takes a lot more explaining. I would say Westfield is absolutely a unique place in its own way. It has its own personality, and you have to like Westfield's personality, I think, to like Westfield. And its personality is made up of a lot of different pieces, and you have to like those pieces, or at least a great majority of them, to like Westfield overall. You don't have to like all, of course, but Westfield is a phenomenal place, in my opinion, to live. It's a phenomenal place for a lot of people who live here to live. And it's a phenomenal place for a lot of people who don't live here. So I don't know what it is exactly that makes Westfield a really great place to live. It's just a bunch of pieces put together to make up probably a pretty good answer for it. But if you have any questions about Westfield at all, any of those specific points, then make sure you reach out any ways you know how. And until the next one, we'll see you later.